talking Flight 666. Now this one is directed by Rob Palantina. Now this movie is actually put out by, wait for it, The Asylum. Now if that makes you run for the hills, well, that was an Iron Maiden reference, and there's a reason for that. But anyway, I digress. The Asylum, obviously known for putting out mockbuster after mockbuster, but every now and then they do actually do some original movies, and this is obviously one of them. And I've got to say, they actually have some reasonable horror movies, and there's a couple of them I actually genuinely really like and enjoy. So Flight 666 is actually quite a fun film, I've got to say. So low budget kind of ensemble movie, couple of kind of familiar faces you'll see, probably most notably Paul Logan. You've seen in all sorts of kind of, action, science fiction, horror, kind of B movies. Jesse James D'Angelo as well, he's got a role here. And the story focuses on this flight, up in the sky somewhere, and it seems to be constantly hounded by this very kind of like severe storm that is obviously scaring the passengers and crew alike. But not only that, there seems to be some type of supernatural force at work here, and that it starts kind of slowly. Some passengers see weird kind of visions outside the plane, almost like there's a spirit standing on the wing and things like that. But as the movie progresses, these kind of like paranormal events intensifies, and obviously it becomes a serious problem as the movie gets going. Now, what actually happens? Well, obviously you have to watch the film to find out. But let's discuss what works and what doesn't work with Flight 666. One little kind of segue. I've got to say the Flight 66 title's a little misleading because it implies that there is some sort of satanic stuff here, which isn't the case, I will say. But nonetheless, a small little point. What I liked about this film, actually, is pretty fun. It's a fun movie. I've got to say, I thought the variety of different kind of supernatural phenomena that we see throughout the movie did a good job of kind of keeping you interested and having different kind of like set pieces that were kind of varied enough that kind of you don't feel like you're seeing the same thing over and over again. A lot of the passengers had very different experiences, all these kind of like these strange things, and the threat isn't necessarily obvious about what's going on. I mean, as the film progresses, you kind of maybe it does become more obvious about what's happening, but I feel initially, you're kind of at a loss about what's happening and kind of like what could be the cause of everything. I've got to say, I've got the actual cast were for the most part quite good, with maybe one exception. But for the most part, all the cast here did a pretty decent job in a kind of a B-movie, horror movie way, but portraying kind of somewhat real people, especially some of the passengers I thought seemed very kind of like, authentically just real people. And there are some fun characters. The air marshal was very fun. The pilot looks like the spitting image of a young Adam West, which I thought was quite good. So the actual cast, I think, were all likeable at least, if not necessarily maybe Oscar worthy, but all pretty good for this movie. The effects work a little bit mixed, but there are some pretty decent effects here, and a lot of the time the effects are very kind of quick on screen, or they're kind of in shadow, so it kind of works. But there's really a couple of kind of money shots, so to speak, where we'll kind of see the threat, so to speak, in a more explicit way. And I thought that they were quite good, especially kind of the first reveal of that was very, very good. And I've got to say, it's quite a fun beginning. A little bit it dips in the middle, but then it kind of picks up again at the end. So that leads me on to the negatives. Yes, it kind of, I feel like at the middle part of this movie, it doesn't quite know where it wants to go, and seems to be a little bit stagnant from here and there. I mentioned there was one kind of cast member who I wasn't so keen on, and that was, I think, maybe that was the way it was written. There is the stereotypical kind of male steward who is the kind of the very stereotypical kind of gay character who is very cliched, and to be honest with you, seems pretty useless as a flight attendant, because it's always the other flight attendant who seems to do anything, whilst this guy just kind of sits back and lets her do all the work. So that kind of bothered me a little bit. The effects are on the cheaper side, although I did like some of them. There are some of them which are kind of a little bit CGI, and towards the end it's maybe a little bit kind of cheap CGI heavy, but there are, don't get me wrong, there are some fairly good effects, and some of the times it does look effective. It does get a bit hokey at times. The reveal about what actually happens and how they discover it, I thought was ridiculous. There's a kind of a MacGuffin, shall we say, a smoking gun, if you will, that is kind of obviously discovered towards the end of the movie, which is ultimately leads to kind of like to the conclusion. I thought, come on, that is beyond stupid. I mean, without giving spoilers, you'll know it when you see it, but it's just like, no one's going to do that. But anyway, overall, yes, it's a little bit of a hokey film. It is kind of cheap, but it's kind of fun. It's a fun B-movie horror film. I think it's worth most people's time, with some fun performances, some slightly OTT characters, a good variety in kind of like supernatural horror. It's not overly gory. It's not a particularly offensive movie. It even has a little bit of social commentary here and there, so I thought that was quite good. But I think it's worth a watch. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me comments and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.